JJK 265 was absolutely peak, so let's go over some of the questions and theories that it spawned, but spoilers beware. All right, so to kick things off today, we got a couple questions from NYO. The first one is, do I think Sukuna saying he will take out everyone Yuji cares about is foreshadowing for the Tengen assimilation, aka merger? And yes and no. In this moment, I don't think that's what like Sukuna is alluding to, but obviously, in order to start the merger, we know that all of the culling game players have to go bye-bye. So in a way, it's kind of foreshadowing that, right? But in this moment, I don't think Sukuna is like teasing the merger or anything. I think he's just trying to get under Yuji's skin. And specifically, I don't think what he's saying there is that he's going to take out the people Yuji cares about personally. Like he's not saying, I'm going to go, get your friends and family just to stick it to you. Instead, I think he's offering a rebuttal to everything Yuji was just trying to teach him, because Yuji was trying to show him that there is value in every human life, right? So Sukuna is saying, I'll show you how valuable those people are. I'm going to take them all out. So that's how I read that line. And then NYO's second question is wondering if everything that's going on with Yuji and Sukuna right now is akin to that moment with Sukuna and Jogo, where they're in like that white space kind of pre-afterlife scene or whatever. And they seem really similar, right? But the only reason I don't think it's that is because Sukuna even says, like, I've had these moments before at the peak of energy, like you refer to here. But then he says, but whatever is going on here isn't quite like that. So is it Yuji's domain? Is it something else entirely? Does Sukuna not recognize it because he's the one like being impacted by it, as opposed to in the Jogo situation, he was kind of the outsider? Hard to say, but Sukuna's confusion about it makes me think that it's not exactly that, but it could be. Next up, we got this question from Stefan, or it might be Steven, so forgive me, but he wants to know if I think we could see a parallel to Chapter 11, where Yuji and Sukuna are in the innate domain making that bargain, the binding vow that they make, and then, Sukuna chops Yuji's head in half. And I didn't even think about this, but I would absolutely love it if we got some sort of allusion or parallel to that moment. I think that would be absolutely peak. Next up, we have this insane donation from the Blue-Eyed King. Thank you so much for your generosity. And not only that, my man is a YouTube member as well, so massive shout out. Thank you so much. But he wants to know if I think that Full Power Sukuna could solo the verse if we removed Gojo from the picture. And same question for Gojo if we removed Sukuna from the picture. And absolutely. Easily, honestly. Now, let's put a little bit of salt on this, because who knows where certain characters might end up, like end of series. Like Yuji could be a massive problem by the time this is all said and done. But where everything is right now, Gojo and Sukuna just stand apart from the rest. And if the other one of that equation was removed, then yes, I believe that both Sukuna and Gojo could solo the verse. Next up, Aruden says, I think you should release an audiobook version of JJK. And why is nobody talking about the soul dismantle panel? There is that panel with the scissors that might be cutting the connection between Megami and Sukuna. Is Yuji only drifting time for that to finish? And I love that you pointed this out, because I have been focused on that panel trying to figure out exactly what Gege was trying to show us there. But I'm with you. I think that it's showing the scissors, especially in the conversation that they were having right there, where like not everyone is born with a specific role, and yet we know that Yuji, the way he manifests cleave and dismantle, are those scissors, and there are those strings in the background. It definitely felt like it was setting up the way that like Yuji has Sukuna dead to rights in at least some form or fashion, and those scissors are perhaps about to cut the string of Sukuna's life. Perhaps they're about to cut the connection between Sukuna and Megami. I don't know for sure, but I definitely think that was building to something. So I'm glad you pointed that out. And an audiobook version of JJK. I don't know exactly what that would look like, but at some point, maybe after JJK fully ends, I would like to explore like releasing maybe like arc reviews where I go over like what happens. Not necessarily like every chapter, but maybe again large arcs or something. We'll have to see. Let me know if that would be something you guys would be interested in. Next up, we got this question from Twinticles on Maki and Toji, who wants to know if they would be affected by cursed speech due to their heavenly restriction not having cursed energy, and the fact that most domain expansions cannot recognize them because of that fact. And I would say that yes, they would still be affected by cursed energy because they're not just immune to cursed energy in the same way that we see, hollow purple and red and blue all work on Toji, right? So just because he doesn't have cursed energy doesn't make him immune to the effects on it. The reason that most people's domains don't work on them is because the domain targets the sure hit effect by attaching onto a cursed energy signature in an individual. So that is why Naoya's domain didn't work on Maki. However, I say most because Sukuna's domain would work on them, as we've seen at this point with Maki, because he has cleave specifically target inanimate objects, aka items without cursed energy, aka Maki and Toji. Now, speaking of sure hit effects, we have this question from Zay, who says, what is Yuji's sure hit effect? And at this point, we honestly don't know, but my best guess would be that it is a soul cleave or a soul dismantle. And he also says, I don't agree with Sukuna having ass pulls, but for the sake of lobotomy Kaisen, do I believe Sukuna is going to have an ass pull next chapter, or is he cooked? I do think he's cooked insofar as we're going to get like a great moment from Yuji and they're going to have a fight, but I don't think he's cooked as in like he's literally already dead and we won't see anything else from him. I do think there is more still to happen, whether he just starts the merger or whatever the case may be. So, whether some people want to call that an ass pull or not, I don't know. I do think we're in for a great moment here, but he's not completely done yet. Next up, we got this one from the anonymous anime man, and there's no question or anything, just some kind words and sharing his love for the chapter. And man, I'm right there with you. Thank you for the support. Next up, we've got a bit of a longer one from Diamante here, so y'all pause to read the whole thing if you'd like, but it largely deals with this idea of a Gojo return, but also a Geto return, and the two of them facing off against the merger, and perhaps the merger being controlled by Kinjaku in some form. And I certainly think that would be poetic. We could get this kind of, get back moment from the two of them on the sorcerer that largely ruined their lives in a number of ways. But personally, while I do think Gojo can come back, and I know all of you guys are familiar with my ideas there, I do think he has the potential for a moment. I don't really see Geto coming back. I think his story is largely done at this point, but on top of that, I don't think his body is like in a position where it could feasibly come back, but we'll have to see. Next, we got a couple of interesting points from Thomas here. The first one is that perhaps in chapter 265, Yuji was less so trying to get through to Sukuna, and instead his words were meant for Megami, trying to give him hope once more. And I love this. I've seen a few people talk about this, and if this is the direction Gege goes, I think that's beautiful and poignant, Yuji trying to reach out to his friend. But what I will say is I do also think the words were meant for Sukuna, but it could have been a double meaning thing. Right? So all I'm saying is that I don't think it was strictly meant for Megami, because I do think there was purpose in Yuji trying to give Sukuna that one last act of compassion and mercy, like you even mentioned here. And you even go on to say that it would be cool if that act of compassion was tied to some sort of binding vow where now Yuji's domain or his technique or whatever gets even stronger because he did offer his opponent an out that they didn't take. Kind of similar to Sukuna's binding vow where he increases the range of his domain due to it having an escape route. So I love that idea. Next, we got this from LR Echo, who says, the whole journey north just to end up south makes even more sense when you look at Sukuna's domain hand sign, the one that represents Inmiten, the demon who guards the southern direction. And yes, I absolutely love that connection. Next up, we got another long one from Trevor, so y'all pause to read it, and this is just the first half, but to respond to some of the things you talk about here, it's this idea that Gojo could be the Maitreya, aka the second coming of the Buddha, and I definitely think that's possible. I've put out a video talking all about the Shitigarba and the Maitreya and Yuji's hand sign, so if you didn't see that, I would highly recommend it. But yeah, I think it's totally possible that Gojo could represent that in the story, but it could also be Yuji, it could be Yuta. I think there are a number of options at this point. And here is the second half of the comment for y'all to pause and read, and some interesting things here. Up here, I love this because I didn't notice. Trevor points out that in the panels of all the people Yuji lost, they're actually in the order that he lost them, except for Gojo and Choso. Those should technically be swapped if that order were to be maintained. And this could be one of those things that's absolutely nothing. Maybe Gege didn't have a particular order when he was drawing those, or maybe there is something there. So food for thought for sure. And then a couple of other things. He says that Buddha was enlightened when he was 29, and Gojo would theoretically be 29 if we factor in the weird prison realm stuff. Very interesting. And then also some stuff about Bardo, which again, I do talk about this in that video that I referenced earlier. I'll try to remember to link it down below. Next up, we've got another longer one here, so y'all pause to read the whole thing. But General Tempest put together a really cool analysis comparing JJK to Christianity. And as we know, Gege takes a lot of inspiration from real-world religion and mythology, with Buddhism being a heavy focused, but clearly he's taken inspiration from Christianity as well, because we have a character literally named Angel whose curse technique is Jacob's Ladder, which is directly from the Bible. So y'all check this out. It's a cool analysis. I will say that I don't think Gege is going bar for bar with Christianity this hard, but I definitely think there's some influence there. Next up, Bakari wants to know, what are the chances Hikari or Urume get off-screened? And I personally don't think that's going to happen. I think we could get an expedited version of their fight. Like, we might not see all of it, and it seems pretty clear that we're not going to see all of it. We just keep checking in with them. But I at least think we will see the final moments of it. Now, that may take the form of either Hikari or Urume showing up, like being the victor, but if that happens, I do think we'll get a flashback of what exactly happened. Next up, I got this question from Justin, who asked if Gojo would be a good mentor for somebody like Mob. And I went ahead and refunded you because I haven't seen Mob Psycho. And I know I need to get on it, and I do plan to. I absolutely love One, and I've loved One Punch Man, so I'm sure I would love Mob as well. I just haven't gotten to it yet, so wanted to refund you since I can't accurately answer this. And actually, speaking of refunds, I also got this super generous donation from a Teresa, but there was no question attached to it. There was a name here, and I marked it out because I don't want to dox anybody, but I searched up that name on both Instagram and TikTok, and I didn't have any DMs, or I couldn't find an account with that name or anything, so I don't know if you were trying to ask a question or if just something got lost in translation, but please reach out to me if this is you, Teresa, and if I don't hear from you in a few days, I will be refunding this as well. Next up, Lynn wants to know if I think this was the right time to officially reveal Nobara's fate in the manga, referring to those panels of everyone Yuji has lost. And I think so. You know, I don't think there was like a good or bad time to do it. It was obviously this really cryptic thing that we've been wondering about for forever, but maybe Gege just thought he was more, clear than he really was, because we do have that moment from a while back, that moment between Megami and Yuji where they just kind of sit in silence when he asks about Nobara. And then we have the, comment from him at the art exhibition recently where he said he had planned her fate even before that first arc. So, I don't think there's a problem with this kind of serving as the cementing factor that, yes, she is indeed gone. But, it is what it is. Next up, Cameron also comments on Nobara, saying that he had high hopes after not seeing her in the airport scene, but now, it's pretty much confirmed. And yeah, I'm with you. I think the airport scene, it was interesting that Nobara wasn't there, but since it was a younger Gojo, to me, that seemed as if he was surrounded by all of the people who had like a foundational effect on him. And since, he only met Nobara much later, that could have been why she wasn't there, even if she is already passed on, right? But then your second question is, do I think Unlimited Void has ever shown anyone any information on how to beat Gojo and Limitless? And no, I don't think so. And I've got a few questions about like Nirvana and Unlimited Void, but my interpretation of how that works, and I'm not saying this is right, is that unlimited information does not equal all information, which is kind of counterintuitive, but like, just because your brain is flooded with infinite information doesn't mean you're going to know literally everything there is that's possible to know. Because just in the same way that an infinity can exist between me and your screen right now, because we can keep chopping that distance in half, there's literally infinite information in just that sequence, if that makes sense. So perhaps everything that's getting flooded into someone's brain is just complete nonsense, right? So I don't think like the key to enlightenment is hidden within the information that Gojo like presents to his opponents, or, the key to beating him or anything like that. If that makes sense. It's kind of a very like complicated idea. Next up, we've got a longer two-parter from James here, so y'all pause to read this first half. And to address what he's talking about here, he's saying that Yuji might have been intentionally missing the cleaves and dismantles that he was doing prior to the domain in order to set up like a trap for Sukuna. And I think this is a really cool idea, but I don't think it's necessary just because the way the kind of narrative was building up to Yuji's domain was because he essentially needed this sure hit effect, right? Because Sukuna was even fearful of his blows, but since he RCT'd and got his arms back and was able to defend better, he was like, it's really no problem for me if he doesn't hit, thus leading to the domain with the sure hit, which leads us to the scenario here. So I do think, again, it would be a really cool idea, but it's not my best guess for what's happening based on the way they built it up. And then pause to read the second half of James's question here, but it's just some analysis based on Yuji and what he represents. The one thing I'll push back on here is I don't think that Yuji is still touting that like you need a good death in order for like your memories to continue living on. I think, which you go on to say here, that it's really just about the inherent value to all life, regardless of your role and regardless of your death, in my opinion. But you mentioned him having a lot to do with like funeral rites, and I'm totally with you there because that bodhisattva that his hand sign represents, again, is this Buddhist like deity who is all about like taking care of those people, kind of ferrying them to the other side, to put it very, very roughly, which would be perfectly in line with funeral rites. And even the early in the manga, when I believe Yuji is going to visit his grandfather's grave, in that cemetery are all of the statues like of that deity. So it very much feels perfectly in line with what Gege is trying to represent there. And then to touch on something you say down here about the true honored one being this combination of Yuji and Sukuna, that's a really cool idea, since especially they have been represented as like these two halves of one whole in what they represent. So if they were to like truly come together in some form or fashion, then that may be the honored one. Cool interpretation. I'd love to see how that played out. Next up, Aiden asked me about this panel from 265 and the clear connection to this famous painting of the fallen angel. And I've seen a lot of people point out this correlation, and there seems to be something there. I mean, they look strikingly similar, but the reason I didn't include that in my symbolism video is because I just wasn't completely sure. Primarily because this is the fallen angel, aka Satan, aka Lucifer, right? So I felt like if that parallel was being intentionally drawn, it would have been with Sukuna and not with Yuji. Now, does that mean it can't be alluding to it? Of course not. Gege might have used this as an art study, or maybe he just wanted to reference that in general. And like I was just talking about, Yuji and Sukuna are basically two halves of the same whole, so maybe he could be using it to represent Yuji, right? Who am I to say? But just because I did think that would fit more with Sukuna, and Lucifer is crying in this painting and Yuji is not crying in this panel, I just don't think it perfectly lines up. So that's the only reason I didn't include it. But yeah, the similarity is striking. All right, next up we got a few questions from Alex, starting with Kurama from Naruto versus Mahoraga. And when it comes down to any battle against Mahoraga, the main question is, do you have something in your arsenal that can completely take out Mahoraga in one go? And in Kurama's case, yes, absolutely. So then the question becomes, will Kurama resort to that, something like a tailed beast bomb, or, just a powerful chakra blast, whatever you want to call it, right? Will he know to use that quickly enough before Mahoraga can adapt to his tool set? And I think probably yes. Kurama's not really going to be one to mess around, so I do think he would have the intelligence and kind of general, wherewithal to realize what he needed to do before Mahoraga became a true threat. But if Kurama takes too long or tries to chip away at Mahoraga, and doesn't take him seriously enough, then Mahoraga will adapt and be able to defeat Kurama. But I'm going Kurama because I think, in more cases than not, he will get the job done before Mahoraga adapts to his stuff. And then Alex's next questions are all about Yuta and his abilities with Rika. And I've actually put out a video before talking about how strong Yuta would be if he didn't have Rika. And in that video, we cover like what Rika gives him and, again, what he would have without her. So I'm going to link that video down below for you to check out. Oh, but one thing I don't answer in that video is your question about what's the difference between Rika when Yuta uses his domain and when he doesn't. And there is no difference. The domain doesn't have an effect on what Rika can do. The only difference when it comes to Rika is when he fully awakens her. And that's when he has that 5-minute timer, access to all the curse techniques, and the unlimited cursed energy pool. But that is not tied to Yuta using his domain. And then finally for this video, Jojo says, the people want Jojo. And this is in reference to our community watch party, which is happening this Wednesday night since we don't have JJK leaks. We might end up watching Jojo Part 2, but y'all let me know in the comments what you would like to watch. And also, while we're here, another community announcement is our art contest officially launched. So all my artists out there, head on over to the Discord and check out the official rules for that. That's it for this one, y'all. Special shout out to everybody who sent in a question, and thank you guys so much for watching.